Hello and thank you for watching. My name is Alexandra, and today we're going to talk about Echo and how it uses level design and all sorts of other tricks to change the difficulty. Echo is a stealth puzzle game where enemies learn new abilities based on what the player does. Echo raises and lowers its difficulty by forcing players to carry out different actions depending on level design and enemy placement. Ramping up the complexity of scenarios, either by adding more enemies or objectives, helps the designers modulate how hard or easy the game becomes. Echo tells the story of N, a young girl on the run from the dangerous cult that raised her while also on a quest to revive her mentor. To accomplish this, she must brave the Palace, a dense, massive, planet-wide structure full of traps. The Palace is populated by creatures N calls Echoes, strange copies of her that are shaped out of a black muck at the start of the game. Whatever N does while the palace's lights are on, from eating fruit to opening doors, the Echoes learn how to do as well. There's a period of darkness between the light cycles in which N can perform actions without the Echoes copying her. It's a fun mechanic that the designers play with in numerous ways. One of the first encounters with the Echoes involves 2 rooms filled with water. In the first room, the Echoes are on the other side of the water while the player crosses a pathway. The Echoes can't reach the player because they don't know how to cross water yet. In the second room, the player is forced to cross water on their way across. When they return through the room a second time, the Echoes will have learned to walk on water. Guiding the player to use certain hazards or perform key actions is one of the main techniques the game uses to increase difficulty. By forcing the player to cross water or use elevators, the game can create rooms where the Echoes will always have certain abilities. This removes any potential crutches that the player might have relied on, such as waiting until it's dark to use an elevator. Echo's level design also tempts players into performing certain actions. Avoiding the Echoes by crossing water or leaping over a small wall can keep you out of their path temporarily, but will cause trouble later on. There's another twist, though. If you stop performing actions the Echoes have learned, they will eventually forget how to do those things after the light cycle resets their memory. Actions become a cost-benefit analysis in which the player must decide if they want to use multiple actions to make things easier now, or if they want to take the risk of besting the Echoes with minimal actions so they can save them for later. In a late-game corridor, for instance, a stretch of stairs leads right where you need to go, but there are multiple Echoes inside your path. You can avoid them by opening a door and moving to a side hallway. The player has to choose whether they want to risk the enemy-filled hallway or avoid the Echoes but teach them how to open doors. They can undo this action by waiting through the light cycle until the Echoes forget how to use doors, but remaining still is made difficult by patrolling enemies in the side room. Echo adjusts certain variables to encourage this kind of decision-making. The simplest way the game can do this is by increasing how many things the player must deal with at any given time. You can have a room with 3 Echoes or a room with more than a dozen. Some doors will only open if the player collects a certain amount of orbs around the room. This often means increasing the size of the room. The larger space and high number of orbs requires the player to spend more time avoiding Echoes and spend more time in their proximity, which means they have to weigh more actions and consider their consequences. Funneling the player towards enemies is another tactic the game uses to adjust its difficulty. Small walkways encourage players to sprint or use their gun, and never use your gun. Do not teach the Echoes how to use your gun. Both of those are useful abilities the player does not want Echoes to learn. Orbs can be blocked by enemies that are most easily avoided by performing certain actions like climbing or walking through water. In some instances, there may be less enemies, but there's also fewer options for dealing with them without teaching them new abilities. In general, Echo likes to either expand or contract your options. You can complicate things by making more things, or you can actually take away options, and both of those are valid ways to increase difficulty. By adjusting the size of rooms and changing the number of enemies, Echo creates scenarios of varying complexity. Limiting the potential actions player can choose or forcing them to use certain actions to proceed lets the designers make more difficult encounters. In the best cases, players will have to carefully decide what actions they will use and whether or not they risk creating deadlier Echoes. Little tweaks, like narrowing walkways or adding 1 extra puddle, have drastic repercussions that test the player and keep the game exciting. It's awesome!